Okay. Well, to begin, I just want to first acknowledge that all of our viewers today are joining us from many different places, and that we acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of these lands. Specifically at the UBC Vancouver campus, and also someone who resides in the city of Vancouver, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered as uninvited guests on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, which includes the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. If you are interested in learning more about the territory that you live and work on, you can visit www.native-land.ca. I will put that in the chat box shortly. So I do want to welcome you all to the Dialogue on Aging public presentation series, which is co-hosted by the Edwin S.H. Leong Centre for Healthy Aging and Providence Health Care. My name is Dr. Eli Putterman, and I am a professor at the UBC School of Kinesiology and the co-lead for community engagement at the Edwin S.H. Leong Center for Healthy Aging. The current theme for our Dialogue on Aging public presentation series is climate change and aging. And I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker for today's session, Dr. Mei Lan Fang. Dr. Fang is an assistant professor in urban aging at Simon Fraser University, jointly appointed in urban studies and gerontology. She's also a visiting research scholar at the School of Health Sciences, University of Dundee. Dr. Fang is the principal investigator of the CIJAR-funded COALESCE Project, which explores how older adults can be empowered as climate change leaders through community-based participatory research. Her work bridges urban studies, aging, and sustainability with a focus on climate resilience, social inclusion, and age tech innovation. And here I will pass on to Dr. Fang to give her talk. It will be about 45 minutes to 55 minutes, something around there. And then following that, we will open up the chat for questions. If you have questions as you're going through, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and I will be navigating all those questions with Dr. Fang. So I will pass it on to you.
Thanks so much, Eli, and thanks so much, Jamie and Kim, from the Center for Healthy Aging for inviting me to give this webinar today. So today I'm joining from Port Moody, which is situated on several Indigenous nations, primarily Coquitlam, Tsleil-Waututh, as well as the ancestral lands of Musqueam, Squamish, Katsi, Kwantlen, and Stolo nations. So yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to give this talk to highlight our CIHR funded project, which is about Coalesce. So the other day I was at the Costco at 75 conference, which was really exciting. One of my colleagues, Andrew Wister, he said, if you want to get a big grant, you need to have the longest name possible. So I was thinking, what is the longest name possible? And of course, it's championing older adults for leadership in environmental sustainability and climate empowerment. So it's pretty long. I think I could have gone a bit longer, but yeah, it's been a great and exciting project, and I'm excited to really talk about it. Um, so I guess what inspired the Coalesce project? So for me, all my research, I feel like, has been shaped by my own kind of personal experience. So mainly my dad. I know that often we try and go for the hot topics, and climate action and change seems to be the hot topic currently, but really, I mean, I guess I want to just share a little bit about kind of growing up in a very traditional Chinese household with my dad and younger sister. Things were very orderly. We were big time sort of rule followers. We recycled all the time, everything sorted into its correct bin. Um, but my dad got older and his health gradually declined. So he began living with bowel cancer, and all of these kind of meticulous routines sort of slipped away. And when these opportunities started coming up, given my background in sort of age-friendly cities and environments and thinking about how older people can age well, I did wonder why, and just honestly, why older people should care about climate change and the environment when there are kind of immediate concerns and just reflecting on my dad's experience when things sort of just kind of fell apart. So concerns like his health, concerns for me as a caregiver, and sort of making ends meet, with him as being a low income senior. And I guess as a natural progression, as a researcher in urban aging, um, I'm really curious as to how we can then work with older people in really trying to understand climate change and climate impact, and really try and understand what it has meant for older people across their kind of life course, with the different types of messaging and the different types of priorities. And I guess how to work with older adults to um, explore climate change for themselves, using research tools and local knowledge, because I do feel like knowledge is power, and it's power for us to stay comfortable and stay well in our homes and our communities for as long as possible. And I think Coalesce was really born out of these questions about how can older people um, explore this issue for themselves, and also from a belief that good research does happen when we put ourselves in other people's shoes. It's also about building relationships and working creatively with folks outside of academia. So it's not just about let's do community engaged research or citizen science or all of these methods, but it is about kind of learning and growing together. I do want to highlight that, this project wouldn't be possible without all these really amazing researchers from diverse backgrounds and diverse disciplines, and also working with the community as well. So, just noting that we're working very heavily with Silver Harbor Seniors Activity Center with Anwin Lovren, and also with several co-investigators from, UBC SFUN in the UK, as well as our senior center partners. So I guess just a little bit about the sort of climate change um, vulnerability issue, and to really emphasize that climate change does affect older people across BC in many different ways, depending on where you live and your social circumstances. And there are several risks to be considered. So it's not just about extreme heat, but it's about extreme cold, wildfire smoke, and also flooding. And just noting that also there are various systems which can be affected by climate change. In addition to individual health, also housing, transportation, and accessing healthcare. All of these sort of crucial support systems can be affected. And I don't need to really mention that the 2021 heat dome, or I should mention that it caused over 600 deaths in BC alone, predominantly in older populations. And I just want to quickly also emphasize that, our government does have some priorities, which include pollution, waste management, and emergency preparedness. But I feel like there needs to be special attention paid to older people's health and well-being and how climate change impacts their everyday lives. So quickly highlighting that, across the global context, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report highlights particular urban vulnerabilities in older populations. And mainly, we need to highlight this because, as you all know, 21% of the global population will be 60 years of age and older. And extreme weather cases does impact mortality, displacement, and can situate older people in quite vulnerable positions and isolate them as well. So, this vulnerability is shaped by the intersection of age, health, ability, income, and also place, geographic context in which you live. So often you could think about this as perhaps, in these extreme situations, that there is a triple jeopardy sort of involved if you're thinking about the intersections of age, your health status, and perhaps some geographic disadvantage. And what I found really interesting when preparing the proposal for the COALESCE project is how older adults' voices have been excluded from the climate change discourse in many ways, and especially from key decision making. So our project's mission is really thinking about how the WHO age-friendly cities and communities framework um, should consider climate change and how we can build more climate resilient, age-friendly cities and communities. Now, with that, we wanted to really work with older people as co-researchers to support them to become climate resilient change makers. So again, kind of bringing older people to the fore and kind of centering them within the discourse and the research. We also were very keen on having this sort of transdisciplinary collaboration and with the focus on working with the community sector. So we do have researchers from, urban studies, urban forestry, from health sciences, gerontology, and also from public health. But we are working with methodology that sort of stems from more sort of urban studies to more public health. So it is quite transdisciplinary in many ways. So the aim and the context, as I've highlighted, we really wanted to sort of empower older people to learn together with students, and I'll go over that in a bit more detail on how to be more resilient and respond to climate breakdown. We wanted to continue our growing partnership with 411 Senior Centre, shaped by our previous project, which is working with 411 to build a collective of older adult researchers. So using the methodology that we've developed to train and work with older people to be fully engaged throughout the research projects, not just as sort of token people that you involved on an advisory capacity, but as people who are undertaking the research with us. We wanted to engage older adults from various different senior centers. So for this project, we partnered up with 6 senior serving organizations, and we wanted to explore climate impacts and strategies for resilience. And I'm going to be going over the several different phases. So phases within phase 1. So in terms of geography and community reach, the focus is predominantly around Metro Vancouver, but also the Lower Mainland. So we wanted to focus with, doing this work with our current kind of community partners situated within Metro Vancouver, but we wanted it to be also to move out to be less sort of Vancouver centric and into the Lower Mainland. So we've got um, senior centers working with us from diverse geographic areas. So in terms of sort of more urban locations, we've got 411 Senior Center situated in Vancouver. We've got Silver Harbor Center situated in North Vancouver. We're also working with folks out in Mission from Boswick Center and also Wilson Center out in Port Coquitlam, as well as South Arm Community Center out in Richmond. So in terms of research principles and framework, this project is guided by community-based participatory research. So for those of you who aren't as familiar with this approach, there is a key focus on equity, inclusion, and shared decision making. So all of my research um, stems from key issues that the community have identified. So seeing ourselves as instruments for research rather than people that are going out to do the research and then sort of taking off. So what we're really interested in is working with the community to see what the key issues are and then including them in the grant development process, in the data collection, in the analysis, through to report writing and dissemination and knowledge mobilization. This work is also grounded in the intersectional place perspective. So a theoretical model that I developed as part of my doctoral research, which integrates, you know, cons social constructs of age, gender, ability, but also thinking about how these identities can shift and change across different places and also across the life course. So how these are all sort of interlinked. So, for example, thinking about how one's sort of social mobility, social status can change across place, but also across time. So, as you age, um, you might move up in social mobility, but if you migrate to a different place, your social mobility might then move more towards a downward sort of trajectory. And these experiences change across the life course, which then shape different opportunities, um, and also might put someone in a more difficult social situation. So it helps to reveal different layered sort of context specific challenges, but also really understanding how people can become more resilient based on their sort of past experiences and overcoming these challenges. And this perspective, for me, it helps to really support the development of more effective interventions. So for this project and phase one, I do want to highlight that this project um, is really situated within three phases. So initially, I made the mistake of thinking that the opportunity that I was applying for was a 2 year funding opportunity, but when it was really 1 year. So I often go sort of super big and thinking I'm going to do really great things, big things, three phases. But in actuality, we were only able to focus on the first phase, which is more exploratory. The second phase is thinking about designing and implementing sort of tools and resources for climate action and working with older people. And then the third phase is thinking about how we can get this information out there in an accessible way to create more impact on the ground. What we're planning to do after phase one ends, so after we run the course of this CIHR Catalyst Fund, is to move towards possibly a project grant to support phases two and three. Now, I do want to highlight the role of senior centers for this work. I feel like senior centers are the key sort of second places for older people. So you know, when they retire and they're no longer working outside the home, for a lot of older people, senior centers are key. They're key for social support and connection, but also accessing various types of essential services um, that support their health and well-being and their ability to stay very much connected within the community. And just highlighting again our key partners, and this project definitely would not be possible without the support of, the executive directors and the presidents of all of these senior centers that we're working with. So this is the super cool map of the three phases, which our project communications coordinator, Marlena Mykrantz Bryce, who used to also be a key sort of uh, product designer with eBay. So she kind of retired out of that position she was getting burnt out, and she decided to work with me. So her old buddy. So we've known each other for 20 years, and she's helped to kind of really help me to map out what these three phases look like in through this image. So stage one is about the exploring of what this could look like. So how does climate change impact the everyday lives of older people? And it's focused on two key methodologies or two key methods. So undertaking a rapid realist review, which I'm going to go over and talk about in more detail of what this looks like, and also undertaking life course interviews with older people. So with the rapid realist review, we're working very specifically with about 7 older adults from Silver Harbor Center, and they were recruited and trained to work with our urban studies and gerontology graduate students to undertake a pretty intensive, what I would say, a systematic review almost, but with a focus on context, mechanisms, and outcomes. So what works for whom and in what context. So that was really fun and interesting. And I'll go over with you what worked and sort of what didn't work so well and how we can sort of do better co-research with older people, which is one of the key goals. The second of which is these life course interviews. So, you know, we were really interested in learning about what climate change actually means for older people who have experienced, or for people who have experienced this change in discourse across the life course. Um, and um, we are currently analyzing this data, but I might be able to share a bit of the key themes that are sort of coming out, which are really quite interesting. So the second stage is really situated around this approach of citizen science. So thinking about how everyday citizens can go out and collectively acquire this data and analyze it so that we have this kind of abundance of knowledge. What we're looking to do is recruit about 20 to 25 older people. And so far we've had so much interest. We probably have about 40 older people who are really keen to be a part of the second phase. So Marlena and I will have to do a bit of a lottery type situations. But we've partnered up with RDH Building Science, a building science sort of engineering firm, and they have offices across North America. And what was cool about this partnership is that when I was doing my master's of public health at SFU, actually, sorry, my undergraduate degree, I made a really close friend, Claire Lapine, and we stayed friends throughout. And I went into academia, and she went into RDH, and she's the one that actually sent me this CIHR call because we wanted to really work together. We're like, she's situated within environmental health, focusing on air quality and particles, and I'm doing more of the kind of social science and community engaged work. So together, we're looking to bring home sensors from Ontario. So RDH is donating 20 home sensors to us, which the older co-researchers can keep. And we're going to be really trying to gather this data within people's home to help older people not only track air quality and humidity and temperature within their homes, but also be able to analyze that over the course of seasons with student co-researchers. So that as the data is coming in, we'll be co-analyzing this information together to look at the trends, but also to engage in deeper reflection. So as this information is coming out, how is it in how is the co-researcher, older co-researcher feeling within that particular time? If it gets to extreme weather and the air quality changes, what are some of the key reflections that are coming out? So this data is going to be super useful for RDH as well because they have this sort of age-friendly initiative that's kind of embedded within um, one of their departments as well. So a key goal of theirs is to think about as they're developing new builds, how can they, you know, develop in a way that helps to support older people. We've also partnered up with UBC's Cool Hoods team, and they have a micro-credential program on focusing on climate action, but also a Cool Hoods workshop, which is a bit of a neighborhood walkthrough and helping people to find areas where they can keep cool during the summer. So they're going to be delivering a few workshops with our co-researchers. We're also working with Technical Safety BC. They're going to be running a few workshops with seniors to really help us understand how participants can manage and use electrical devices such as air conditioning systems and use that safely within their homes. And finally, in order to kind of engage in dialogue about what we found, we're going to be hosting a big sort of knowledge cafe or world cafe. And hopefully, if we're able to bring folks out from not only community, but from government, it'd be a great way to, uh, yeah, to hopefully shape some policy and have some real on the ground impact. So now you can see where my mind is sort of going. There's a lot going on even within this 1 year, but outside of that, there was actually two additional phases, which we're hoping to then acquire more funding to do. So what's the purpose of all of this, citizen science and co-research? Well, we wanted to bring in this sort of intergenerational working. So in the past, when we worked with 411, we brought graduate students to work with older adults in undertaking a piece of research that they identified as important. So thinking about mobility and walkability within their neighborhoods, it was just great. Older adults really enjoyed the process and the engagement with students, and the students really learned different ways of doing research and how to engage with folks from the community and working together collaboratively. So there was that kind of shared learning involved. But also we explored our purpose is to sort of explore and understand the lived experience, so the everyday realities of older people, and identify different climate resilient type strategies. So far, we've recruited 25 older adults and 25 students. Oh, sorry, not 25 students. So we did change that a bit. So my mistake. What we did do in the end was have 25 older adults working with 5 students, and each student had had between, about a group of 5 older people. And that was sort of the initial idea or goal from 5 senior centers, but now we've ended up with 6 senior centers. So you can see how things have sort of escalated. And we were looking to conduct 25 life course interviews, so very much focused on storytelling. Now we've ended up with 37 life course interviews. So again, just highlighting the sort of huge interest and how things just sort of expanded like a balloon. And we worked with student co-research and older adults to conduct a participant-led rapid realist review. So really thinking about an evidence synthesis approach on what works for whom and in what context. So again, just providing a bit more detail about the 3 workshops. I'm not going to go over this in too much detail, but just wanted to visually highlight to you that for this project, we're not only trying to conduct research, but we're thinking about what can we offer to senior centers, to seniors, which are useful as we're undertaking this work. And again, we're hoping that we're able to engage policymakers and international stakeholders as well. So one of our co-investigators, Teresa Pauly, she leads the COPE project, which is focused on extreme weather and aging. And she has partners from, I believe, Brazil and some in another country out in Europe. But what we're hoping to do is to connect some of the seniors from the COALESCE project and do a bit of virtual sort of story sharing with seniors that are situated in other geographic contexts that are experiencing climate change. So as I've highlighted, we have conducted 37 life course interviews. We've recently completed the participant-led rapid realist review, and we also held a dialogue session with older adult students about what they found in the rapid realist review, the task of the rapid realist review. And what we're also looking to do is thinking about some climate action mapping, some more storytelling, and some synthesizing of ideas. Those things are what we're looking to do as well. I'm also working with a policy specialist in urban studies, so Yushu Zhu. She is situated in the School of Public Policy at SFU. Her focus is around housing, but she's very keen on climate action as well. So Yushu and another policy student is actually analyzing some of the life course interviews to pull out information to undertake a policy analysis to produce a brief that can be later circulated as well. I'm also working with a couple of students out in urban studies who specializes in GIS mapping. So they're looking to create some heat maps and to also create some maps which identify cooling spots in and around the senior centers. These, again, were add-ons. So seeing how this project sort of expands and grows. Okay, so what is a participant-led rapid realist review? So this is super interesting. I mean, for me, I've undertaken a lot of different types of reviews throughout my academic career, and I find that the realist review most rewarding because it's not just going out and looking at the evidence and synthesizing it. In which case, a lot of times it's we need more research. That's the outcome, but it's actually thinking about the context, mechanism, outcomes, and intervention. So really, what's working? If we're looking at the literature, what is working in terms of uh, climate interventions that focuses on aging and older people? But how is it working for which groups of older people? So not all older people are the same, you know, not all people are the same, and also in what sorts of conditions. Now, traditionally, this type of review is led by academics, but I wanted to see what this would look like if it's led by older adults, sort of guiding the process. So this is one of our student co-researchers, Sharon Sa, and one of our older adult co-researchers, Carol from Silver Harbor. So actually, um, for this particular piece of the work, we provided training to 5 students, and there was approximately 7 older adult co-researchers. So we were aiming for 5. We had about 10, and then we ended up with 7. So right in the middle. And we co-developed and implemented a search strategy. So my lead researcher at the time, Elise Stone, who's worked heavily with Silver Harbor Centre, and I, together with a colleague out in the UK, Sally Fowler Davis, we developed a search strategy. And so what we did was we trained older adults through a couple of workshops on what is a search strategy? What do we need to do? Where does it come from? What are the key words that we're looking to use? How do they string together? How do we input this into an academic search database? And then also thinking about how you then move through phases of screening the data that you found. I mean, screening the information that you found, extracting the information, and then analyzing the information according to the lens of what works for whom and in what context. So we were very ambitious. We're like, okay, let's do this in 12 weeks. And to give some context, a very traditional types full-on systematic review could take a year, for example, and maybe with a team of two or three. We were trying, I mean, granted, we had a team of 15. They're trying to do this in about 12 weeks. So weeks 1 and 3, we had some orientation. We did some literature searching. So after we did the two workshops with older people and students, the students then worked very closely with their older adult co-researchers to do the screening and extraction and the analysis. And then they pulled out sort of key ideas through these reflection labs that we undertook to then talk about these key issues within in weeks 10 and 11. And now what we're doing is producing a paper, which we're going to then feed back to our co-researchers to then further input on and ideally co-publish with us. So here are the key search terms that we've identified. I'm not going to go over these in too much detail, but just to highlight that these were the key sorts of terms that we were working with. And these are the key databases that we all searched through. Yeah, and that was a super interesting process that I'm going to talk a little bit about, some of the key journals that we look through, and also we look through the gray literature databases as well. And our sort of key criteria was a focus on adults age 60 plus. It has to be focused on climate change and or extreme weather, discusses resilience, adaptation, or intervention. There has to be some sort of focus around what works for whom and in what context. It had to be in English language and published after 2014. So we picked 2014 specifically because our colleagues out in gerontology, so Gloria Gutman and Gary Hack, who's also a collaborator on this project, um, established the term of climate gerontology back in 2014. Now, this isn't to say that this research wasn't done until since 2014, but it was when the term was first kind of established and conceptualized. So exclusion, studies not about older people, not related to climate change, opinion pieces without evidence, unless perhaps it was about some new theoretical development. And we also excluded reviews, but we did hand search each of the reference lists for, other articles which might be relevant. And this is our sort of prisma diagram. And just to bring some context into this. So a prisma diagram is something that we produce when conducting evidence reviews, and it helps really, it helps us to situate the whole search strategy process. So what did we get from the beginning? How did we sort of whittle it down to the few that we're going to include and really read through and sort of analyze? So at the start, I don't know what I was thinking, but I thought there isn't that much research out there, surely. So I thought, okay, 12 weeks, done. But in fact, when we actually looked through the databases, there were thousands of articles around this topic area. And so that was a bit challenging. We ended up with quite a few relevant articles. Now, granted, some of the articles were just focused on extreme weather and older people with no mention of climate change at all. And some of the articles were focused specifically on emergency preparedness and aging, and it helped us to realize that climate change isn't just this kind of neat little term. Climate change impacts everything. So actually, when you're looking at the literature, you're like, well, that can be part of climate change, or this can be part of climate change. Um, so yeah, it became really quite a challenge. And this is some of the themes that have come out, and this was identified by the older adult co-researchers as they read through the literature. And what was interesting is that they were very focused on solutions at home. So what would impact, what could be taken from these articles that can really help Metro Vancouver? So one of the first themes is around the context-specific relevance of climate impacts. So from their conclusion, it seemed to them that Vancouver faced fewer and less sort of severe climate disasters as it relates to situations out in further out, for example, out in India, for example, and other countries in China, for example. And also a lot of the interventions that they found from the global literature felt very disconnected from local reality. So a lot of our seniors talked about having lived in Ontario, for example, and how, nothing, Vancouver's so mild, it can't be happening here compared to my experience out living in Ontario, for example. So the second key theme was around cultural and regional adaptation. So adaptation strategies from hotter and drier regions. So cooling, water use. We talked a lot about, so some of our students are from Iran, and they talked about different types of traditional strategies or interventions that they use to stay cool, different types of architecture out in Iran, which was really interesting. So really thinking about um, the cultural regional differences as well for how to adapt to climate change. And also thinking about different types of multi-level resilience. So in order to help to adapt and become more resilient, it's not just about sort of band-aid solutions, but thinking about infrastructure, how to communicate information, how to have more, resilient and solid healthcare systems, and also thinking about different types of social supports. So who do you contact in case of an emergency? Are you connected with the community? And also then thinking about how you can change or adapt as an individual. So what types of behavioral changes, what changes can you make in the everyday to better support you? The fourth theme was around older adults as active sort of change makers. And we really talked a lot about how older adults want to be part of the solution. So it's not just being seen as these vulnerable people in need of care, but being part of the change to generate solutions, and to highlight that their skills as, one of the older adults, she was an urban planner, her skills as an urban planner, past experience of in work and in education, and how investing their time can help enhance climate action and resilience. Some of the older people talked about, well, there's more we can do if the key challenge is that it's so hot that the trees are falling down and knocking down our power supplies and, not having electricity for ages, then maybe we need to go out and start watering the trees. And yeah, that there are things that we can do in our everyday to help protect the environment and protect our land and protect our trees. A final theme is around relatable and localized climate action. So the older adults really valued the interventions that were coming out from the literature that can be applied within the Vancouver context. So how can we um, create solutions that supports more accessible transport, cooler streets. How can we redesign the neighborhood, shape and develop more climate ready homes, have more health resources nearby, and how do we build more stronger social networks? And all of them highlighted that these types of supports is currently offered within senior centers, for example. So just wanted to highlight a little bit about what we found in the dialogue sessions. Not going to go over this in too much detail, but this type of methodology is focused around having and I want to say this, so this is a bit of type an unstructured sort of conversation to reflect and question and sort of co-develop new information, make sense of the information. We created a sort of safe environment for people to share their knowledge. Um, I forget what Sally said, but I think she said the Chatham House rules. So basically, she was saying that you tell us everything, but we won't name you. We won't say Carol said this outside of this environment. So that was the rule that we followed. We had a fishbowl format, and it sounds funny. And I remember some of the co-researchers were like, I don't want to be in a fishbowl. So I volunteered and I entered the fishbowl myself. And yeah, we had people sitting around the outside, but we really wanted to center older people's experiences and their ideas. Oh, there it is at the bottom. Grounded in Chatham House rules for confidentiality. So who is in the room? Older adult co-researchers from across Metro Vancouver, participants from all the senior centers, the co-researchers, and our visiting scholars from Anglia Ruskin University, Sally and Rosie. And we had a lot of, I've changed the names of our participants who really highlighted um, their sort of perspectives on this whole process. So Nancy talked about, how this really helped her reflect on these fires that were really close to her home, how she witnessed these sorts of extreme weather changes firsthand. Jane talked about stream keeping, educating grandkids, and how she marched, for action. Now, Jane, she was a real activist, really trying to get us out into the streets. Pat talked about being interested in just observing and attending and reflecting on the fishbowl conversations and thinking about, actively changing her every day and thinking about changing her social life. Rosie talked about, this process as getting street cred from her kids because, she's gone out, she's done the research, and she's found really interesting things from the process. Anna, she was just wanting to be a raging granny. That's what she said. She wanted to be a raging granny in activism and support intergenerational learning. So Toby, he's a caregiver, and his partner, his wife has um, quite, I believe, quite severe dementia. So this was very personal to him. So from this data, he became very emotionally kind of engaged in the process and in the findings. So from the process, a lot of the co-researchers, it wasn't easy. So working with the older adult co-researchers, they were initially very surprised about being researchers because the traditional way of involving older people in research is just sitting and advising. So that's what they thought they were coming in to do, sitting and advising. So they were kind of confused and surprised and actually felt a bit overwhelmed at the start because, you know, we hired them as researchers to undertake the research alongside older people. They found reading the articles most rewarding. Yeah, the search process, they didn't like it. It wasn't. It just wasn't their sort of cup of tea. And I get it. It's a really daunting process to search through all these databases. But this process helped uncover some new insights. So communal living, thinking about intergenerational grief and different environmental design techniques. What worked really well, meeting regularly with students. I mean, one of our students, Farnoosh, she's great. She went to Nanti's house like all the time. They just became sort of best buds. We're like, okay, Farnoosh and Nanti, they're having a great time. Um, some other partnerships, it didn't work as well. We had a couple of co-researchers sort of drop out because, and perhaps it was the search strategy process that really pushed them away. But there was a lot of cross-general collaboration, and that was meaningful for the students and the older people. Most enjoyed these unstructured conversations and sharing personal stories about climate change. And what was surprising was that the articles became more interesting than expected, so we were told. And and Toby talked about feeling really empowered through learning and this, shared grief. What was difficult? Technology challenges. It's something that, it's funny because I've been working in this age tech digital divide area for a while, went over my head. Technology barriers, PDFs, SharePoint. We didn't provide clear enough instructions, and some of the co-researchers told us that, if you give us a link and you want us to click on this and it doesn't work, it really puts us off, wanting to continue. But they also noted that, I don't want you to give us paper copies as well. You know, we can do technology, but just tell us how to do it and we'll do it. Clarity. So uncertainty about roles and expectations. So again, are we meant to just sit and advise or are we meant to do this stuff with you? Timing, some folks joined late. We did this over summer. A lot of people went on cruises. They came back and they joined uh, the review process. And the heavy volume. I mean, there was a lot of literature, a lot of reading. But what we did was we started so suggested improvement, and we did this towards the end, was start by reading one article together and discuss as a group and moving through it. So instead of a 12-week ambitious undertaking an ambitious task, let's maybe let's maybe double that time frame. So insights on climate change and action. So some question, is it too late? Like what are we doing? Can we still get involved? Can we still make this change? There's a lot of frustration around with politicians basically saying that they're going to do these certain things and then doing the exact opposite and actually giving us a real sense of helplessness. A lot of co-researchers talked about engaging with this topic maybe differently, making it more fun, more joyous, having a comedic element, having more conversation. And there were some gendered insights. So our core research talked about, well, it's the women after leading this process as well. So we had um, one male participant, and he's like, I felt a little bit bad for Toby, but he was like, no, the men do it too. And there's a desire for systemic and design level change as well. So really thinking about not just these sorts of band-aid solutions, but how we can really shape policy. Okay, some behavioral change quickly. So Rose talked about, you know, perhaps we need regular air quality checks and alerts. So bringing in the home sensors, that's going to be really interesting. Carrie talked about, being aware of privilege, just being in BC. I mean, that's a real sense of privilege. And, you know, a lot of the seniors, because they were from North Van, they were aware of you know, being in a very affluent environment, in a very affluent neighborhood. Anna, I believe Anna was the raging granny. Not sure, but she wanted to take action and not just observe. And Jane talked about, this process really sort of, stretched me. Um, but it was really helpful in terms of staying engaged and getting her mind going. Pat talked a lot about brain rust, and she didn't want that. So this whole kind of co-researching was really helpful for that stimulation. And Toby, so not Toy, Toby said that this was really good for his life. So what we will do differently in future, more structured training at the beginning, start with shared readings, more informal gatherings, because we did have a informal gathering at White Spot at the start. And I think I set the bar too high. So there was cakes and tea at White Spot, and then we ended up at SFU Harbor Center. We still had some cookies and coffee, but it wasn't White Spot. So clarity around roles and what doing research entails, and more engagement with global international literature as well. So what works in other contexts. So would they do it again? Absolutely yes. There was cheering at the end. They want to engage in some different topics. Others want to do more activist-oriented work, getting out into the streets. They truly appreciated working with the students. I think my key takeaway message is, if we're doing co-research, work with students, have that intergenerational um, connection. And there was a quote, seniors have neuroplasticity. So some final thoughts. Research um, is not just for the young older adults. The young older adults are very eager and keen to get involved. So we're going to be again going out to the senior centers and yeah, getting folks involved. Again, just highlighting that we have over 40 individuals wanting to join the next phase. So we're going to have to pull names out of a hat. This project showed that co-research can be really meaningful and transformative, not just for the research, but for the everyday lives of people who are involved. An ongoing challenge, how do we scale this up and shape policy? So this is our work next year. As we're doing the home sensor stuff, we're going to prepare the big proposal. And there's deep gratitude for everyone that was involved. At the end, some cheering, some whooping. So yeah, for the co-researchers, their kind of key reflections, one quote is that it was remarkable to be asked to do the research rather than just advising on it. At the end, older adults recognized that they were the experts. At the beginning, there was just some insecurity on, oh, could I do this? But actually, there was that realization that they are actually the subject matter experts. Student support, one of our students, Dana, was essential to meaningful participation, tech platforms, a challenge, more onboarding in the future, simple tools which we're looking to develop. So again, just highlighting some of the key points, but organized in a different way. I'm hoping to share these slides as a resource for folks. And what makes Coalesce truly unique, in my opinion, is that we are actually truly participatory from the ground up. I mean, it's difficult, it's time consuming, but it works well, and it's been very rewarding. We've centered really around inclusion, trying to figure out who we need to involve more from across the senior centers, perhaps seniors that aren't able to get to um, the places that we're doing the research. Perhaps we need to go out to their homes more and yeah, and to build in the time and resources to do that. I guess the key piece is that we really truly try to co-produce knowledge and think about different actions and not just describe problems. What's next? We're synthesizing and writing the paper from the interviews and the participant-led rapid realist reviews. We're looking to create some knowledge mobilization tools. We don't know what that exactly looks like yet, but we're working with folks from UBC as well as folks from the community to see what's most useful for seniors. We're still hosting workshops and giving talks like this. We're trying to build a network of climate engaged seniors, and we're preparing for phase two. Okay, and then just quickly highlighting that we do have some publications under review and hoping to then share this once it gets published. Thanks so much, especially to all the co-researchers, um, to the students. And yes, if you want to contact us, please do so. We have this very nifty website that Marlena has designed, and we're trying to build a library of resources. So that's currently up. So if you go to Coalesce, the website, you'll be able to find all the resources that we've compiled for anyone to use to, yes, to become kind of climate change makers. Thanks so much. And I think I've gone over by 2 minutes, but that's okay.
All good. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Thank you, May. It's really really inspiring to see the process of, working closely with the community of adults and the patience required with non-scientists to do this scientific endeavor. And I commend you for that because most scientists and researchers would run in fear. So I really commend you for not running in fear and really taking this on and establishing some very important precedent on how to do this properly and successfully, especially with a review. Like that's, it's pretty fantastic. So congratulations to you. Um, there are a lot of there are a lot of comments about the from the audience about how interesting they find and very comprehensive this project is. And I think, one of the themes that I'm going through these is um, whether so I'm going to read you one, and it's mostly a comment. So I'll start off with Pat's comment. Um, Interesting, very comprehensive project in phase one design and very well presented. Besides the senior samples drawn from residences, it might be valuable, or have you thought about, I'll frame it as a question, to recruit from senior activist organizations to record their experiences of getting involved in climate action and strategies they would recommend to enhance resilience among older adults.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Um, we I've made a nice connection from spec at the recent seniors Costco conference of BC. So I am trying to make these connections. We're establishing and creating new partnerships for phase two. But I guess that the key challenge for us is the resource bit. And I think we've already overstretched our budget because I keep wanting to do more and more. But absolutely, I agree. I think for the next phase, we we will we will do that, and we're actually trying to create these partnerships right now.
Yeah, and is that part of like kind of your global, because you were talking about scaling up, and scaling
Yeah.
up, that for me is given how thorough and thoughtful and engaged you are with every single individual, how do you scale something like that up? So what's your ideas that are percolating in your brain on scaling up?
Yeah. So, I think the pie in the sky version is across Canada, but we're actually more probably looking at across BC, thinking about working with senior centers that are situated in kind of more rural and remote parts of BC. And then again, working with students from universities within those areas to do the training up, to do the
Mm.
thoughtful work. And because we're aiming for undertaking this across maybe 3 years instead of just one, there will be more time and also more resources to do this. So thinking about
Hmm.
kind of replicating this, in a more at the more provincial level, but then also because this is a pilot study, we'll have much more data to develop more comprehensive tools, which is the kind of goal of phase two, is how do we develop these tools to support um, climate resilience when it comes to older people and quality of life. So yeah, but I think
Hmm.
tools not just, you know, about climate resilience, but how do we work better with older people and with community in research?
Right. Yeah, that would be very helpful, I think, for our community of researchers. And um, I'll move on to a question by Ariel. They had to leave, but because they had to get onto another presentation, but they said that it's too bad support for windows and doors don't apply to apartments where many older adults live. Um, they say it would help a lot, of course, with lowering heat and cold in both seasons. But do you find that there will be ways that come out of your research that kind of provide the tools to become an advocate to push government to start, including apartments in their plans and in their subsidies for doors, windows, and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. And one of the interesting things is when talking to some older people who live out in Langley, and this is shocking to me that actually a lot of the new apartments they're not designed to take in to keep the heat in. So new
Hmm.
apartments, some of the older people talked about at minus 10 degrees that the apartment just would not stay warm. So they had to leave and go to their
Mm.
friends' homes, and it's not something we think about, you know, when it comes to extreme weather. We're always talking about the heat, but actually it's the cold as well. And yeah, and what I guess when I'm thinking about are these new builds, windows, doors, can they be built for for climate change? Because it
Hmm.
is happening. We need to think about how we can build, develop our buildings better. I'm hoping that the information, our collaboration with RDH will, yeah, will
Yeah,
shape some of these new designs.
fantastic. Um, so I'll move to the next question by Stephen, who says, "Nice presentation and helpful to hear the results and voices." Uh, I missed another one, but I'll go back to Francis's after. Um, he states we can use this to customize the Cool Hoods workshops and apply some of the learnings from the elders as leaders and local instigators
Mm.
collaborations in their communities. Um, do you have any thoughts on that? And they also provided a link to the Cool Hand uh, Chaps workshops, including Sean Suzuki elders. Some, yeah. Do you have any comments on this or
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm so happy that Stephen joined because Stephen's a co-investigator on the project. So it's almost like
awesome?
we're exchanging this information. He's like, we could do this. I'm like, yes, yes, that's what we should do. No, absolutely. You know, I'd love to involve as many people as possible. And I think, throughout this project, we've gained a lot of momentum in terms of people wanting to partner up and wanting to be involved. So yeah, so
Yeah,
yes, we need
right.
to start thinking about how we can shape the Cool Hoods workshops.
Fantastic. Okay. I'm going to move back to Francis's question, who also pointed out that I missed her question, but I knew that already because I was like, hey, where's the question about support? So Francis has a really great question about what kind of support was offered during the storytelling when, when it was revealed some emotions like fear, anxiety about climate change, or grief, as mentioned in the presentation. So Frances herself is an 80-year-old who does experience anxiety around climate change. So during your presentations, did you have someone there to support and hold the space? And how did you hold the space for the revelations, revealing of fear and anxiety and other emotions that were difficult?
Yeah, so I think how we dealt with that is that for these dialogue sessions or for these interviews, we allocated a lot of time. So if there was, you know, if the participants rate any, experiences around anxiety or fear, we were there to talk about it and talk through it. So we made sure that that time was there and it available, and we had extra time during the dialogue sessions as well. But I
Mm-hmm.
do agree that maybe, part of what we can do is look for these types of resources and look actually at the literature about um, how we deal with, you know, grief as well as it relates to climate change. And there's a specific term for that. Starts with an S, but I keep forgetting.
Right.
It actually is a type of anxiety that people have around climate change.
Mm-hmm. I did post in my postdoc supervisor from like over 10 years ago. She, who also was a speaker last year in the biology of aging, she also does a lot of work on climate stress.
Mm.
And I was just Googled her and she had an NPR talk um, where she talks about turning climate change anxiety into action. I don't know if it's helpful. I've never listened to it, but I know she's, communicates a lot to the public around managing climate anxiety right now. So that might be of interest to some of the listeners on our talk here. Um, there's also a comment from Miranda Sutherland, who is the queen of graceful and purposeful aging, advocating for positive aging, and recently published a book on this, Aging Out Loud. She has a second positive aging conference. She was curious about partnerships, so I'll let you had your contact information at the end, so maybe you
Yes.
might want to put that up again later so that she can contact you. Um, I'll move on to Victoria's question, who wonders if you plan on including Indigenous voices as well as other vulnerable populations, perhaps for equity and representation.
Yes, absolutely. And it's already in the work. So I'm, for the next phase, I'm working with a colleague of mine, Kamala Todd. She's an Indigenous urban planner within urban studies, and her focus, part of her focus is around sustainability. And so I'm looking to work with her um, to, yeah, bring in Indigenous knowledge and perspectives in the next phase. I'm also
Hmm.
RDH is quite interesting. They do a lot of work in Nunavut as well. So with the Inuit community and Stephen as well has some connection. So I don't know what that would look like specifically because I'm trying to focus on BC, but if we then bring in Nunavut, how do I how do I justify that within the proposal? But no, though we're having these conversations, and I'm also looking to work with some folks who are doing some really interesting work with I think it's the PICS project, the PICS fund, but they're doing around extreme weather um, and sort of preparedness with folks in kind of rural and remote parts of BC, with a focus
Hmm.
on working with Indigenous people. So definitely, I feel like that's one of the main critiques, even in gerontology as a whole, is that, there needs to be more inclusion of perspectives and working with Indigenous elders um, within gerontology and definitely within the climate gerontology movement. So
Hmm.
yes,
Okay,
yeah,
great. And what about other type of vulnerable populations and um,
yes.
yeah.
I mean, it's yeah, it. I mean, it's a bit challenging as well. Um, when we're working with senior centers, there are some senior centers that are situated within, the inner cities of Vancouver, which we
Mhm.
can access vulnerable seniors, but there are other senior centers that are situated in more affluent parts of the community. And so we do recognize that people who come out and who are very interested in climate change perhaps aren't the vulnerable seniors that, you know, that we need to reach. Definitely from South Arm Community Center, we were able to speak to uh, Mandarin speaking seniors, Punjabi speaking seniors, and gain their kind of perspectives
Mhm.
as well. So yeah,
Fantastic.
it's
Yeah.
definitely on my mind and thinking of better ways to do that.
Yeah. You're not alone. I mean, all of us researchers, as you know, the more we engage, with diversity and equity, the more we're like, but we're still not equitable enough. We're still not,
Hmm.
targeting a diverse enough sample. And I think it's always a push. It's always in the back of our minds when we're conscious about this and conscientious about it to be, but but who's next? But who's next? Who are we still missing? Who are we still missing?
Yeah.
Whose voices are we not giving a voice to? Right. So um, there's another question from Miranda. Following on Francis' questions, have you considered ways, you might want to read it, because there's a section that's in quotation marks. So, ways to avoid research strategy process to pushing away initially signed up researchers, since you mentioned that in your findings. Um,
Ah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean that was something that was kind of unexpected because at the start there we had a group of maybe 12 seniors that were really keen to do the review, the rapid realist review. And when we actually during the first workshop when they realized that this is the work that they had to do, some of them, I mean the key thing that we were told is, for example, one participant said, well, I'm 85 and I don't have that much time left, and I don't know if I want to spend this time searching databases. So I was like, I hear you, there might be,
Hmm.
for me personally, I probably don't want to spend my time searching databases all day. But I think it's just really identifying the different parts of the research that people want to be involved in. So as much as we want to be inclusive and to have people involved in every aspect, we have to realize that people don't want to potentially be involved in every aspect. There are certain parts of the research that are more interesting and fun. And so to have
Hmm.
that flexibility, I think is key. So we did do
Right.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, I don't see any other questions popping up. Um, so do you have any final thoughts, comments?
Um,
Do you want to put up your contact information one last time, or put it in the
sure.
chat? Either
Yes, I
one.
was I was just
Yeah.
pasting to do
Great.
that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So for if anyone wants to contact me, please please take the email address that she just pasted inside in the chat. Um, and yeah, so yeah, any closing statements?
Yeah, just that, when I was at the Costco conference recently, we talked about one of the speakers talked about how we're all in it together. So that's just kind of my final thought is that I think we should view, climate breakdown as a challenge that we have to face together. Um,
Mhm.
so it's not just one piece of research or that piece of research, but I think we're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Um, I want to thank you so much for giving us your time today, and thank you to everyone for coming and for asking great questions. Our next, oh, can't see the email. Oh, she only
Oh,
sent it
sorry.
to the host and panelists. Oh, yeah, you
Oh
might want to
no.
select
Okay.
everyone. Yeah, go back
Sorry
into it
about
and
that.
say, yeah,
Look, I'm being
yeah,
exclusionary
perfect.
already.
It's been done. Jamie, yeah, perfect. Thank you. Um, Sorry about that. She sent it to the wrong group in the chat. So Thank you. That's what I was saying. Oh, yeah. Our next session will be on climate change as well. We're in the midst of figuring out a date. We don't have the date just yet, if I'm not mistaken. We have a likely speaker who's Dr. Michael Cole and from the University of British Columbia in the School of Kinesiology, where I'm from, who does a lot of work on um, really air pollution, especially during periods of smoke exposure and movement, and how to do movement properly or adequately while we are faced with fire disasters that are occurring more and more often. That's a big part of his work. We're just trying to make sure we have a correct date. So as soon as we have a date for everyone, you will see the invitation come out. But for now, I wish you a great rest of October, a great early November until we see you next. And thank you all very much for coming. And thank you again, Dr. Fang.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.